creaking.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast based on writers sitting around, drinking coffee or wine, and talking about writing, publishing, the whole creative process. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Your hosts today are John Schmidt, Chaz Brenchley, Karen Brenchley, David Welsh, and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 30, Not Safe for Work.
XXX.
Yes, indeed. This is episode XXX. So it would be wrong not to honor that numeral designation.
And talk about Romans.
Yes, we're going to talk Romans, but more importantly, we're going to talk about
Romance?
sex and romance. And there's an ocean of possible targets here under the 30X. So I've arbitrarily chosen to narrow our focus on some questions on how we and our other favorite authors use sex to advance a plot. And it is going to be a little bit out of bounds to discuss porn because we're only PG-13.
And yet you know.
Which we will define as stories which are entirely about sex with only enough plot to advance the activity of people having sex again.
Yeah, my definition of porn is it's not a story, it's a sex aid. And I speak as someone who has written this.
Hands up if we've written porn. My hand's up. Chaz's hand's up. John's hand's up. Dave looks frowny.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, in the self-help literature and so forth, there's it's kind of axiomatic that porn is a bad example to follow if you're actually trying to learn to do the sex. So how do you define it as such? I see a contradiction here.
I do not. I know what porn is. It is, as Jeannie said, sex for sex's sake. And I once took a wonderful book, Gail Carringer's book. It had fish and werewolves in it, and I'll have to remember the title later. But I took it to a dear friend who said, "Oh, that's not porn. That's not even erotica. That's just a romance." But ferreting out the difference between a romance and erotica and porn can wait.
Oh, I was just about to dive in there.
Right then, splash.
Well, actually, I wanted to jump in there too, because one of the most erotic love story books that had no touching, no taking off of clothes or anything else is Dorothy Sayers' Gouty Night. Okay, because this is a Peter Wimsey mystery from way back when, and he and his true love are they're talking poetry. Okay, they're very learned. They're seducing each other at this very high level, and it's sexy. It is a sexy piece, and no clothes. No clothes get taken off.
Hang on. There is a scene where he takes off his blazer in the punt, and then he falls asleep. And this is the moment where she actually falls in love with him. And she leans across him to extract a book from his blazer pocket. So totally clothes get taken off. But it is one of the most erotic moments in fiction.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, I was going to say I have favorites from when I was in second grade or so. William Bostock wrote a story called I, Cleopatra, and my grandmother had it. And Cleopatra has graphic sex with Charmian, her maid.
Really?
And then Caesar, and then Anthony.
Certainly.
So I found these books very squirmy and probably inappropriate now, and nobody would let kids read it. But, then it was followed by Clavel, which my grandmother, who was, by the way...
James Clavel.
James Clavel. She was getting her English degree when I was learning to read. So,
Yeah.
James Clavel, and it was Shogun in particular, had, right before the Richard Chamberlain came out. And there was sex, and it was there, and it made sense in the plot. And it wasn't about sex, but sex happened, and it was just a natural part of the story. So those were two of the examples that I thought of. It was an important part, because Cleopatra seduced people to change history. So you can't have a story of Cleopatra without, I guess, having a sex scene.
But I mean... If Cleopatra seduced people to change history, then what I wanted to say was that I don't use sex in a story to advance the plot like that. It's not there to say, okay, if we have sex now, then things will change and da-da-da. I.e., if characters in my books have sex, it's because their relationship is advanced to the point where they want to have sex.
You have written
Yes.
You've written
Yes.
a 6-book series in which one poor woman is married to 2 men, and she never gets to have sex.
That is true.
So,
Again, it was about the characters and the relationships and admittedly the politics.
Right, and so you're definitely not writing porn. To go back to I, Cleopatra,
Okay.
one of the advantages of writing that sex is that you are showing the power of that character.
Mm-hmm.
She seduces him.
Mm-hmm.
She
yes.
takes that power. And when we talk about sex, and we can talk about the male gaze and the female gaze and many things, but just that note was important to say. You don't tend to advance your plots that way. But you write strong women and you show them in many, many ways. You don't need to use sex to advance your plot that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just have as usual, I have a contrary approach. There is a school of thought out there that says that every scene needs to advance the plot. Indeed, that every paragraph, every sentence needs to move the plot forward. And I do not subscribe to this. I think there is time, particularly in a novel, but you can find time in a short story too, just to develop character and to let things play out in characters' lives the way they would. And people have sex. It's not always a means to an end. It's not always a tool to manipulate things.
A lot of your stories are very character driven, so that is kind of the plot in a way. So I think.
The hero's journey. Chaz, you're a very heroic journey sort of man. I love you. The Lords of Light, Desdemona, all of these are a hero's journey in their own way. And they're beautiful. And they may or may not need that. But then sometimes people have used sex, like I see it on TV. And I have one recently that was really just bugging the crap out of me. So you guys are going to hear about it. I have not read The Expanse. So I need, who's read it here? The novels?
I have read the novel. We're talking James S.A. Corey.
That's the one. Yes, those two gentlemen.
Yes.
So in the opening scene, somewhere near the opening scene of the TV.
Yeah. We need to be clear about
this. The main character guy is banging this girl in 0G, and it is one hot love scene with 2 rockin' bodies in 0G, and all of that because basically. We ice that girl very quickly. She gets fridged right away, which becomes a motivating factor that we are hinted at of, yes, he might have had feelings for her, but now she's dead, so that's a motivating factor for him to move on. And then at the end of season 1, there's this moment of, for other feminist reasons, it bugged the crap out of me, of the strong female lead saying, oh gosh, that was a rough decision. I just hate making those. You should take over for me, you darling man. And then
I don't remember this from the book.
And then he takes her clothes off, and they have matching underwear, which of course means that they're shagging in an airlock. So for me, this was like sex was used twice because we have to have sex, and it has to be indicative of something, and it was completely unnecessary.
I'm sure
the second time, but not the first.
Well, the first time was just, if you were showing intimacy, you could lean over Peter Wimsey or in the thing and brush and decide he's fallen asleep, and you have this fond moment, a wisp of hair moved back out of his face. There are ways to show intimacy.
I don't think you understand how Hollywood works.
Oh, she does. But
the rules of television are very different from the rules of fiction. Hello?
Are they different, or are they considering a different audience? Was The Expanse made for a bunch of guys to watch, or for guys and girls to watch?
I don't know. I have not watched it. Hello, John. You want to say things, I can tell.
We're getting off track. I do want to take a moment and mention anyone who doesn't know it, or have someone else explain it, what fridging someone is.
Fridging. Fridging is when you say, I am going to take a meaningful character, show you a beautiful relationship, and then I'm going to shove one in a refrigerator or ice or freezer or death or whatever it takes.
Usually death.
Usually death.
In deep space in the case
in
of...
order to provide emotional motivation for the lead male character to be able to accomplish the rest of the plot.
Usually that way. there must be examples where blokes get fridged.
Very rarely.
Yes.
Very rarely.
Or people just don't know.
Wait. At the end of Wonder Woman...
This will be a different issue.
Let's remember at the end of Wonder Woman, we fridged Steve...
Oh, yeah,
Colonel
that's
Steve,
right.
yeah. Major Steve.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah, Chris Pine.
We fridged Chris Pine, which will hopefully be a piece of her motivation later, because...
He gets unfridged.
Oh,
Okay, but no, it's a different one, but with the same name.
and he's been cloned.
Yeah, or something.
I don't know.
I have no idea. It's
So
not
yeah,
out yet.
it's the Punisher was used it. They killed off all the characters. John Wick and the freaking dog. Okay, they fridged his dog in order to give him
And his
motivation,
wife.
and his
They
wife.
double fridged him, but it came up
Yeah.
especially after. I became aware of it especially after Deadpool,
Oh yeah, Deadpool.
where the whole motivation was the dead wife, and it's a valid point, not as related to sex scenes as it might be.
Then, one of my favorites along these lines is a Harlan Ellison story, which is A Boy and His Dog, in which he's always trying to get laid, and the world has ended. It's a Holocaust. Everyone is seeking food and sex. All these young men are seeking food and sex, and he has a talking dog, okay, who helps him. And he finds a girl. They go down into the underground, and they have sex in this preserved city, and they have lots and lots of sex. And then she goes out with him. He gets her to leave. He finds out that his dog has been waiting for him and is starving, so he feeds the girl to the dog. And he says, she kept asking me, do you know what love is? Sure, I know. A boy loves his dog. Because...
Yeah, I can see it.
But it's a friendship versus love versus men and women. I mean, it was a buddy movie. But it's the same kind
It
of
is
thing.
a buddy movie. I would say a buddy movie more than. I was thinking more of like Richard Adams. I had read Watership Down, and I was told that he recently read Watership Down to you. Beautiful.
That's a bunny movie, not a buddy movie.
However, let's talk Richard Adams. You read the bunny movie, you think, oh, the man writes nice, fluffy bunny movies. And then you read Shardik and Maya.
I've never read Maya, but I loved Shardik, but I've only read it once.
Shardik has such graphic scenes that I still have them blazoned in my brain.
This is why I've only read it once.
Okay.
I think it's probably a better book than Watership Down, but it's not a book I want to go back to.
Yeah, and Maya basically from the start was all about a prostitute.
Right.
Or a courtesan. So, stolen later by, what's her face that wrote Jacqueline Carey's series, I think, very derivative of...
Yes,
yeah.
Kushil.
And then, God, who here's read Eric von Lustbader?
Can I have a 20-second rant about Eric van Lustbader?
Do it.
Or Eric van Lustibugger, as we used to call him. There was this thing. See, Eric van Lustbader, for those who haven't read him, used to write huge, fat, international 1980s thrillers with lots and lots of martial arts. And lots of sex.
Right.
And it was a peculiar thing, but he was very fond of describing in intimate detail oral sex, and particularly the man giving oral sex to the woman.
Uh-huh.
And this always somehow coincided with my meals.
That's just good luck. That is. So it's like getting a pile of pancakes and eating your way through the middle.
Yes, dear.
So, was his name the pen name, and did he choose it particularly because of the lust part?
I actually don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I'll go look that up.
If it is a pen name, he has used it consistently, and there's never been a suggestion that I've seen of his real name emerging. So I don't know. I mean, he moved on from writing his own books to writing the dead Robert Ludlum's books instead in recent years.
So Speaking of rampant hot toddy all the way through it, Clan of the Cave Bear.
I never read it.
You
but
never read those? Oh my God,
all
Valley
around me were reading them.
Valley of the Horses. That was like high school porn in a way.
Oh.
I think that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I started reading it. It was all porn, no plot. I mean, and that if it's, I mean, there's a love story and a sex story, and I find that the sex stories are just, the sex is there, or often, as we were saying earlier, one of the people there are plot points. They're not people. Okay, they're there to have the body parts move together, or however they're going to do, and then one of them wanders off, and it's not even good sex. It's like it's just boring.
Yeah, well, that is one of the things about writing sex, is that it's really, really hard to make it interesting.
Oh, okay. This is what an interesting challenge. I didn't have these notes, but now I want to say, everyone, think about for 1 second here. What one piece of advice would you give somebody for writing a sex scene?
Okay.
Chaz, you first.
No.
I'll go first because I've had one that's in my mind.
Okay.
Shun euphemisms.
Yes.
Because I have read maybe a lot of porn online at different times.
It happens.
And so here I have like 5 or 6 or 20 pages worth of porn.
Yes.
And you have called the same object. It's
eggplant.
like we are afraid to use the same word twice. So the
carrot.
eggplant is the carrot. It's the firm.
The
It's the
loaf of
proud
sourdough.
tower of his masculinity. It is
Proud.
his
Yes.
hardness. It is his manhood. It is
Yes,
his
on the other hand,
throbbing member.
this just demonstrates how difficult it is, because the opposite of that is that the medical words that we all know are extremely unerotic, possibly deliberately so.
Well, there's a theory that it's a penis when it's flaccid and it's a cock when it's hard.
Yes,
And you can just go with that.
well, when I have in my time I have written erotica, and I have frankly written porn.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just call it a cock.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is difficult.
So that's mine. It's the avoid the euphemisms, the turgidment into her womanhood, into her.
Sure. But I would want to say also avoid too much explicit anatomical detail.
Especially if you do. Oh my God! So in my dad wrote a porno. He grabbed her by the cervix.
Oh. Wow.
There was this brilliant moment where the girl who's listening to the podcast, and I'll link to the podcast, it's Hilario, stopped right there and said, "This man does not understand anatomy," and she brought out a picture to show him. Now, my understanding is one of the other gentlemen was gay on it and had never really looked at a woman's anatomy, so did not know precisely what the cervix was. And the point for me was that, oh my God, the other gentleman did also not know. I can see him. And so don't use terms if you don't know what the hell they are.
Yeah, but also, I mean, you may know what the hell they are, but will your reader? I don't know.
I'm encouraging you all immediately to go out and learn.
It's with bear traps.
Yes.
Whichever way you go. Too much euphemism. Too much euphemism.
The bear is in the trap. Yes, the bear is in the trap.
I'm going to find a way to use that euphemism now.
There you go.
Are they together? Are they doing it? Yeah, the bear's totally in the trap.
Well, the thing is, though, if you were spending not so much time talking about his throbbing manhood goes into her womanhood or whatever, then we're moving into porn rather than actual
I think so,
love, a love scene or it's
erotica.
It's how do they feel? Okay, it's not so much.
That's not the bar that we established for porn, though.
Well, no. I'm saying not for porn, to make an interesting story. How do the people involved? Okay, his member is in her whatever you want to call it.
There's
a throbbing member.
Right.
But how do they feel? What emotions are they?
There is
character?
an analogy here with fight scenes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bring
If
it.
you get too into the mechanics, it becomes dull.
Yes.
Yes.
Nobody really cares except.
How long should a air quote fight scene go on?
until somebody's dead.
Well,
Le petite mort.
the thing is,
Bigly or littly, yes.
I took a woman who was writing a fantasy novel to a convention and let her watch, the SCA fighters fight. And afterwards she said, "Oh, I didn't realize the fight would be that short."
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and so it's things like that, sex, the throbbing members can go on for how long or whatever. I don't care. Again,
I think this is another case where Hollywood has kind of poisoned the well because fight scenes in Hollywood are completely unrealistic and they go on far too long.
Oh, I was going to say there's the short fight scene says I'm fighting all of the goons, but the boss fight scene, like a video game, has to be the one that takes forever.
Well, but in general, they're far too long. There's too much.
So do you realize that The Hobbit ruins this completely by having the entire Smaug fight scene end with one arrow?
It's very dramatic, though.
It is.
Are we talking about the book or the film?
The book.
Okay, good.
We don't talk about the film.
Oh, the film was ridiculous.
I'm sorry, Peter.
I didn't see
Really,
it.
call me next time. I will help you edit that. I don't,
Yeah, just completely fell down in the physics there as well, I think, with the bow. Just
Anyway,
moving around.
Anyway, I mean,
let's not go down that rabbit smog hole.
And there's to a certain extent what kind of a sex scene is needed to satisfy. Like if I'm writing a thriller that is not a Stieg Larsson, men doing terrible things to women.
we're not supposed to be talking about porn.
We're not talking about porn. Sorry, Stieg, you're dead. But
Yes. They're still writing them, though.
if I'm writing something terrible, I can usually resolve it in a couple paragraphs that are a page, no more than a page, really.
Well, no, so we're talking about love scenes. Okay, sex scenes.
Well, sex scenes and love scenes, there's an argument that they're different.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that too. But there's also, so we're talking about sex. So the series I was ribbing Chaz about actually has tons of other things going on. It just so happens to have male-female characters who are supposed to get busy, and some of them never do. But some
I may have heard about this one.
yes, his women characters
Twice so far
never
in this
have
half hour.
sex. But anyway, so but what about romances? Okay, the whole point of the book, no matter what it is, they're supposed to get together. Okay, and then there's porn, not porn, but there's romances where they just fall in love at the end and fade to black, but then there's also, they actually have sex.
Erotic romances.
Exactly, erotic romances. And I've read some of those, and again, some are really good. Some are really not good,
I'm going to go all the way back to Jeannie's original question and say that, not the original question, the most recent original question, blah, 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 and say that if you're writing a sex scene, it is in a novel in miniature because it's an approach. Hi, Dave.
Hi, John.
And then some excitement. I'm moving closer to him. And then
Dave looks
a
uncomfortable.
climax. He gets up off the couch. And then a denouement. He gives me the steely eye and sits back down, which he didn't because he's a stronger man than that. But when
He's feeling used.
he is, which is good.
by all here, because I haven't said a word, and yet at least three of you have
I'm
ascribed
interpreting
actions.
Karen has brought up an excellent point. That is that
But that's nothing new around here. So
the waves of excitement to arousal to climax apply to the novel, apply to the romance, apply to the sex scene. So you're playing a game where you build them up and let them go, build them up and let them resolve. And so my second wish is that, for God's sake, resolve it and then give the poor men some refractory time.
Yeah.
or women, it could be,
After the storm, let the flowers bloom. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. And I think, tell you what, John, I think we should find a couple romance novels and bring them on to talk. We'll do a whole episode on romance. I think that's an interesting topic.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So coming soon, actual romance novels and, the thing of that. Now, Chaz, you were saying something over Coffee Club the other day talking about Andy Offit.
Andy Offit. So when I was teenager, reading nothing but science fiction, or science fiction in school books, but mostly science fiction. There was this writer I was very aware of.
Andrew J.
Offord. And the first reason I was aware of him was that he spelled his name without capitals, in the Ogden Nash sort of way.
Or E.E. Cummings.
E.E. Cummings.
E.E. Cummings, yes. That's probably what I meant. And that sort of naturally drew my attention. And he was a good writer of short stories. I don't think I ever read a novel, but anyway, that was all I knew until short while ago. I came across a memoir by his son called "My Father the Pornographer." And many of us have written pornography, frankly, as a sort of, as a back order. But Andy Offord, it was his main line of attack. He wrote science fiction, he wrote many other things, but mostly he wrote porn, and he wrote it industrially. It's the most extraordinary life that he led, and that his son is Chris Offord, and I highly recommend the memoir because it is revelation. My Father the Pornographer. Okay. Yeah, and he was towards the end. Andy was writing pornography to commission for individual wealthy people, which I just think is awesome.
Also, Chaz would like people to know that he's available to write porn.
Yes.
I think John Norman has a kid somewhere that says, "Oh, my father, the Gore books."
But
are they fantasy? Are they science fiction, or are they porn?
They are.
Yes.
He calls them science fiction. There is nothing sciencey about them at all. And
I hope there's a lot of fiction about them.
There's certainly fantasies.
There was lots of fantasy. No, I didn't know we were going to talk about John Norman. I have many things to say about John Norman. But he is. Yeah, no, I know people who know him. He is this sort of mild-mannered philosophy professor, retired now. Who, you sit across...
I have a friend who's a philosophy professor that I'm going to have to send a copy of this and say, so what are you secretly up to?
Well, exactly. But no, he apparently you sit across the lunch table with him, and he is a charming companion. Until he gets onto the subject of his particular fetish, and how those...
Giant sparrows?
The giant sparrows are incidental. That's part of the.
Don't be obtuse.
Yes. Yes,
yeah, no, he is a bondage pornographer, and he is the classic example of how pornography can be boring, because the early books were readable, and then the more he got into the fetish thing, the more dull they became. John,
the audience shifts. For you, more boring. For a certain audience member, all the excitement.
Think of, Laurel K. Hamilton did not start out writing smut books.
Right.
She started out writing interesting, modern, urban, supernatural fantasy. Sure. Apparently smut sells nicely.
About the time she hit double digits.
About the time she had, it was like the first book of hers I read was book 8. And in book 8, The Obsidian Butterfly of the first series, there was no sex in it.
Oh.
There was this magnificent romance.
Know she came without sex.
I know, right? It's this one book, but a serial killer wrote a letter that was
We'll be doing
dirty,
a completely separate podcast on innuendo at some point.
But then later it became a case that everyone has sex with her to gain supernatural powers, and she is no longer, in my opinion, a writer of urban fantasy supernaturals. Okay. Basically, she's joined the ranks of Emma Hawley and Zoe Chant of I love them dearly, but they are not just fantasy; they are romance porn.
They don't pretend to be anything.
Yeah, they don't exactly.
Well, right,
that's
but
what they
she
are.
evolved from the one to the other, and at what point does she? Yeah. She's either being disingenuous, or she's admitting at some point, well, okay, this has become porn.
Or this is what people want.
Well, has anybody read any interviews with her? Has she said one way or the other what her intention was?
Absolutely no idea.
I don't know. So, final thoughts on the whole writing scenes, though. Kit, you're writing. I'm sorry, you're writing Robin Hood.
Yeah, I'm Karen.
I know.
I'm writing Robin Hood. So I'm writing Robin Hood, but I'm taking. So there is a magnificent sex scene. Okay, it is the Robin and Marian finally get together. Is a magnificent sex scene, which is because he is asexual up until then, because he's in love with Marian, Jesus, or Mary, Jesus's mother. That's his saint. Okay, remember, this is 12th century. This is his saint, and he's in love with Marian. There's Mary and Marian, and it's
we get it.
Not twisted at all. Not twisted at all.
He's got issues.
Well, he's a character in a book.
Okay, if we're going to start adding medieval cults into it, we got to have a whole nother. Speaking of issues, I want a whole nother podcast on mindset, because combat and sex and worshiping a saint. I need another podcast.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I have a challenge. I'm going to lay a challenge down to the listeners. Anyone who listens to this, I challenge you to send us a story seed. And I will take your idea and write a poem during a podcast about it and perform it at the end of the poem. Someone else may pick it up and do something better with it. But I will give you, because all day today I've been thinking, what will I say? And poetry has just been erupting out of me, which, since I have a day job, is kind of dangerous. But moving on.
We're definitely going to have to do that innuendo
that sounds like,
podcast later.
Innuendo, sorry. Anyway, Jeannie, what do you want to...
No, I was going to say, I was just checking I was going to ask, on your cowboy scene, do you have boys out on the road? You going to have sex?
No, it's a young adult novel.
Okay.
And we're not
I assure you that I've read some young adult novels that have
sex. I thought that was obligatory.
We're not going to delve into that in this first one.
Fair enough.
So are you going to delve into cowboys are frequently secretly fond of each other?
Nope.
That's a lovely song.
It's a lovely song, it is.
Well, we will put links to stories and all the interesting things we discussed and songs on the website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You can also find us on Facebook or Twitter. We live to answer emails, so John's challenge out there is a throwdown. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. That's us. Our main web support magic is brought to you by Deirdre McGaffey-Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spider is David Welsh. And John here has been learning to do it too.
Hey, John.
Our intro music is Petty Maid Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with a Morning Person, both by Michael Langberg. You can hear more from Michael Langberg at manyhatsmusic.com. Our podcast sponsor is The Bean Scene and Flatbush Red Wine, and today definitely Kraken Rum.